All right. Welcome to the Due North Sports Podcast, episode 2. I'm Austin Schumacher here with my good buddy Alex Shanilak.
What up?
We're going to be talking some Timberwolves today. Timberwolves lose game 5, 126-97, go down 3-2 in the series, facing elimination tomorrow night in Minneapolis. Let's get a general vibe check, Alex.
You know, right now I think the vibes are relatively low. I will say that it's kind of an interesting situation because of the Dante injury and because of the fact that Ant is, at whatever percentage you would want to say, 60%, 70%. Um, it- and because of how emotional that win against Denver was, it almost felt like this whole series we were kind of playing with house money. And so that has kinda had a mitigating effect on the negative vibes, but when you watch, a game like game 5 happen and you watch your team just get absolutely dismantled, um, it does take away an element of hope because, if we're honest with ourselves, that is a better team. The San Antonio Spurs are a better team. If if we had a completely healthy roster, um this presents a more interesting series, I think. And we haven't lost yet. We're still in it, but I think really the negative vibes aren't necessarily just from this playoffs or this series. It's looking at both what the Spurs have done to us, remembering what the Thunder did to us last year, anticipating if we somehow pull this off, what the Thunder would do to us next round, and then thinking about how far away we are from a roster construction standpoint of being able to compete with either of those teams. So the vibes are not great. I do reserve a little bit of hope, and I found myself having some slight optimism just because we've seen this team in these playoffs time and time again respond to adversity and sort of dig deep and not quit fighting. Now, within a game, we saw it in game 2, we saw it in game 5. Uh, they let go of the rope, but even within game 2, they're getting killed, and then they come out down 12 at halftime, and in the pretty early in the 3rd quarter, they tie the game. Now, from that point to the end of the game, it was a boat race, but I think they've shown they're not gonna give up. How effective they end up being is anybody's guess, but I think they've done enough for me to give them the benefit of the doubt on they're not gonna come out and lay down tomorrow night.
Yeah. Well, that almost gets into like the core of this team. Like San Antonio seems almost a little bit ahead of schedule, and
Mhm.
it almost seems like they shouldn't be ready yet to compete at this level. With Wemby only 21, 22 years old, and is everything kind of passing us by? I
Yeah.
see it almost feels like our window is closing as the roster is currently constructed. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. It's hard not to think that, and this is when you go back and look at the Rudy trade, which I've been a defender of all along because of all the playoff experience and playoff winning that Ant has had because of that. But I think one of the things that I've probably underplayed too much in listening to what some of the detractors have to say about it is that that came at the cost of natural development of a young core, and that's what the Spurs have done here. Now, granted, when you have Wemby, that makes things a lot easier, but they've almost surrounded him with a perfect set of young players. Now they have Fox too, and he was a veteran they brought in to be to do some of the heavy lifting as another star, but um Castle and Harper look like absolute dogs already, and Harper's a rookie, and look at what he's doing in these playoffs. And Oklahoma City's similar. I mean, they didn't draft Shea, but they traded with him when he was very traded for him when he was very young. And I actually think um, they're different in a lot of ways because Shea's a much different player than Wemby, obviously, but they're built very similarly. They're both very deep, and they have this core of wings, young athletic wings who are tenacious on defense. And you look at what we did against Denver. Denver is not prepared to deal with that defense, and that's something honestly, watching what the Spurs did to us, especially in Game 5, it reminds me of what we did to Denver 2 years ago. There were those
Sure.
games where Jamal Murray couldn't bring the ball up the court. We had him in absolute hell, and that's what we look like, and we saw that Oklahoma City did the same thing to us last year. They also the Lakers made a couple of those games interesting, but they're Oklahoma City's 8-0 in these playoffs, and so
Yeah.
you start to go the concern is that and I don't wanna we can have a proper eulogy and talk about the offseason when we're done, we're not out yet, but, um, the cupboard is a little bit bare in terms of ammunition to improve the roster without, either getting guys that have some flaws or giving up quote unquote "key pieces" like a Jaden McDaniels or a Naz Reid, and I think the heart of the issue for me is that we really don't have a a second star if Julius Randle is going to play like he's played in this series. Um, and we can get into some of the details of that as we go along, but he has at times been that guy, sort of the second banana to Ant, another guy who you can run the offense through and you can rely on to sort of be a generator in the offense. And outside of him, we have a lot of really good role players, and we have Rudy's a generational talent on defense, but he's a negative on offense, a,
Correct.
a, a neutral at best. And so, what this series has shown, I mean, because even with Dante is a great player, but he's an elevated role player really as
Yeah.
well. He's not
Correct.
anybody's idea of a star. So it 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 all falls back on Ant, and if Julius, um, whether it's an effort thing or just because of the matchups or, it's hard to say how to diagnose it, but if he's looking like he's looked this playoffs, it's not enough. Ant needs more than that.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna be a doomer and start talking about Ant asking out. I don't think we're there yet, but I think Tim Connolly's got his work cut out for him to make us competitive, because I think this group has reached its ceiling. I think we've seen that.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about the Rudy trade, but I mean, that also kind of plays into the Carl Anthony Towns trade, which brought Randall into the fold. And I think Cat would play much better in this series than Randall in terms of being a second option. Maybe bring Wimby out from the paint where he's just been so dominant as a rim protector. I mean, when you're on offense and they got Wimby on the court and you've got Rudy down there, I mean, it's like playing 5-on-4 on offense.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rudy can't catch, he can't finish in traffic, whereas Cat would bring so much more to the table here. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, especially in this series with his shooting, I think one of the biggest weaknesses we've had is that we've not been able to make shots. Even when we're, at times in a game like game 5, they're just absolutely demolishing our offense and we're not generating anything. But we've also had stretches where we're generating looks and we're just not hitting them, and we don't have, Dante was our aside from Ant, our other good volume shooter, and everybody and I think the connection dropped out or something here. We'll keep rolling.
Oh, you're good.
Roll with the
Yeah,
punches.
you're good.
Um, Everybody else is an extremely streaky shooter, so it just makes it hard. All the defenders have extra confidence knowing that Wemby can cover the entire court, so they can be ultra aggressive, and we can't shoot over it. So Cat would be helpful with the shooting. Obviously, you wouldn't have Dante then either, and we don't anyway. But the interesting thing about Cat, though, I was thinking about this last night, is for all their differences as players and on the court, they are about as different as you could get in terms of bigs and how they play or how they want to play when they're playing well. But Cat and Julius have a lot of similarities in that I think both of them, and I think fans of both the Knicks and the Wolves, uh, for both players would agree with this. They are the biggest roller coaster rides you can have for a fan watching a player, and the peaks of this is awesome. Cat's hitting threes, running the offense through him a little bit. It looks great. Or Julius, bully ball, dominating, whipping passes around to open guys out of double teams, to the valleys of offensive fouls for Cat or just boneheaded decisions,
Yeah.
turnovers for Julius, lollygagging on defense, not getting back, not providing effort. And so I find it interesting that like I said, as different as they are as players on the court, I think the experience of watching them over a season is actually very similar. Um, Neither of them are matchup proof. And, you know, I guess the number of guys that are matchup proof is that list is probably pretty small, but Ant is one of those guys, and we don't have another one that can help when Ant is getting played like he is now. And a healthy Ant, an Ant with 2 healthy knees, um, also is gonna look a little bit different than he is in this series. He's gonna be
Yeah.
more aggressive trying to get the ball when he doesn't have it. He's gonna be probably, more aggressive with trying to drive around or past guys. Like, you can see he's gassed, but that's part of the problem. He's gassed because he doesn't have anyone that can take over for him.
Yeah.
And guy like TJ has looked great in stretches, but he's again a role player. Io has looked great in stretches, but they're not the type of guys that can overcome this defense.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, getting into the Spurs defense, these ant double teams just continue to give the Spurs results. And I don't know if it's more of a health issue with Anthony Edwards being maybe 60, 70% of what he is normally, or just Randall's not stepping up as the number 2 option. But kind of what's your thoughts on these double teams and how um, they really haven't wielded any results for the Wolves, you know. I mean, and this the double teams are not a new thing
No.
for Anthony Edwards to go up against in the series, and we've seen it many times before, and they've had success like in some Nuggets series in the past, and but this has definitely been the most successful iteration of that of them throwing these double teams. Like, kind of, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I was just gonna say it's definitely not new, and it's been a I think a point of emphasis in people critiquing his game, especially in the playoffs over the last couple of years, and we've seen growth there. Um, in both of the last 2 Western Conference Finals runs, he had sort of learned even just to make the simple play, but do it quickly, and the ball's likely going to end up back with you. But by quickly passing out of it, even just to the next guy over, you're creating an advantage for the other, for your teammates there, and then you can run and get open or whatever. But that all takes energy that he may or may not have right now. But part of it too is just that the Spurs have enough. well, Wemby, they got Wemby lurking back there, but beyond Wemby, they also have enough guys that are they're just going to be in your jersey no matter what. They're similar to the Thunder in that way, and we saw him struggle with this same thing against the Thunder. It's a similar style of defense. Um, but I think it hurts. This is one of the areas where I think it especially hurts not having Dante, because one of the things we saw in the Denver series, um, Dante hit a clutch three, and those shots were there where when you position Dante to be the guy who's just one guy over from Ant, the double comes, he can hit Dante. Dante has the quickest trigger finger out of anybody on the team. He just lets it fly. And with him, that's a good shot.
Maybe
He's got,
Nas Reed.
yeah, not Nas too, but uh that combination of those guys or lineups with those guys together, it really comes down to quick decision making versus a more methodical style of play. And in the regular season, you can have the luxury of taking your time and kind of it's almost like some of these you turn it into a one-on-one matchup and it's like a pitcher versus a batter chess match in a one-on-one, but it's like there's not the time or space to do that. And I I'll probably put most of it up to the injury because I think he's shown us enough in the past that he knows how to deal with this, that it's got to be a physical limitation of some sort. But they're not making quick enough decisions. And then that's leading to either these possessions where somebody gets a hot potato with 3 seconds left and has to take a bad shot, or you have a shot clock violation, or you have a live ball turnover. And the turnovers are leading to fast break points. And it ends up being like a layup line for the other team. And so it's all interconnected in what causes these runs. But um, you saw it probably the most in that third quarter in the game the other night, where we went from tying it to down like 20 in the blink of an eye. It felt
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, correct. And I think it's a huge problem with, both Ant and Randall are, like you said, they're just very calculating on their movement on offense, and they don't make quick decisions. Ant likes to kind of linger and kind of decide his next move, and I think it's really hurt them against this Spurs defense. And Nas Reed is having a great series, and he is much more sudden in his movements and getting to the basket, making quick decisions. He's got the quick trigger at the 3-point line where, and getting the ball, dribbling outside of the 3-point line, and the double team's coming, and he just does not make the quick decision, like you said. And I think that's just really hurt them.
Yes, agreed 100%. And I think we've seen the lineups where they've been the most successful, or at least they've been able to go on the best runs, whether it's making a comeback or kind of going on a run to put the game away, is when they've had groups of guys out there that are all pushing the pace and making quick decisions. Because like Io is a guy like that, TJ is a guy like that, Dante is, and Nas, and those guys all feed off each other. And then what happens when that's going well is that actually makes Ant go, "Oh yeah, we gotta keep it moving here." And they don't do enough of that. Julius, um, this dates back to the Oklahoma City series last year. We saw both him and Nas, but Julius was especially egregious with this. Um, they they could not figure out that against that team, this same thing applies to the Spurs team, but against a team like that who's swarming you, you can't get the ball over on the elbow and just and go back to the basket and dribble and try to back a guy down and dribble, because either against Oklahoma City, it's like Alex Caruso is going to come and just take the ball, or in this series, it's like Vassell or Castle or whoever off ball guy is going to come over, or you're just putting yourself in a bad position. And he consistently is doing that. And the really, really frustrating part with Randall is that we've seen what he can do when he's on in dominating a mismatch. Because the luxury with him is when we, especially when we have lineups where like he's our five, maybe it's him and Nas as the bigs. Um, if the other teams are going small, because both those guys can handle the ball, it
Mhm.
a lot of times Randall ends up with a smaller guy on him, and he can just either take him off the dribble or get into the lane enough to do that little shot he likes to do that sometimes has a high percentage, and then it seems like he goes on runs where he's not making any of them. Um, but for whatever reason, he's not doing that in this series, and it's not for lack of potential times where he could take advantage of those mismatches, because the other thing that benefits from that is he has a mismatch. He makes a quick decision to get into the paint. Somebody comes to help. There's an open guy in the corner or on the wing, and he is very good at passing out of those situations and hitting the open guy, and that generates good 3-point looks. We've not seen near enough of that either. We're missing shots, and some of them are open shots, but we're also the I would say the average quality of our shot in this series compared to the last series is way lower.
Yeah.
And Julius, it's very frustrating because Chris Finch will rip into almost anybody else on the team when they make a mistake. I mean, we saw him
Sure.
light up TJ last series. I think that motivated him and it worked, but we all watch the games. We see when Randall's not playing well. In this series, Julius Randle is shooting 21% from three. He has 8 total assists through 5 games, and he has 18 turnovers through 5 games. He's only shooting 42% from two. Um, he's committing 3.5 foul, or how many? 3.5 fouls a game. He's just not. I don't know if it's an effort thing. I don't know if it's a matchup thing, but something's not right with him. And it is so frustrating to watch. And it's so frustrating to watch Chris Finch not do anything about it, at least publicly. Because this also leads into some of the discussion that's been happening is, do you have to make a lineup change? And it's a little bit echoes of, and this isn't an original take. I've seen others discussing this, but if you recall in that 2022 series against the Grizzlies, where we were competitive, we blew some leads. That was kind of our ahead of schedule year, and we blew it. But uh, D'Angelo Russell in that series was sort of the Julius Randle. Um, an absolute liability at times. And it's like, and then Jordan McLaughlin would come in, and Jordan McLaughlin's like 5'9", and he's just making quick decisions, making good decisions, making good passes, hitting shots, making layups, but just like being quick and making the smart play. And it was
Mhm.
finally, I think, in the game 6 we lost, Finch pulled Russell down the stretch and put J-Mac in, but it took getting to the brink. Um, it's clear, I think, to everybody that the starting lineup doesn't work in this series. Every single game, even games we won, we are giving them a lead at the beginning of the game. And part of the reason for that is Randall and Rudy, when Randall's not hitting shots, make it really easy for the other team to play defense. So those two can't really play together. So they need to stagger them. And Finch has sort of done that by more matching Rudy's minutes with when Wemby's out, and then Julius will get physical with Wemby. And I will say now, I have been impressed some with Julius's physicality and effort on defense, especially late in games. He's not completely giving up. He's getting to the free throw line a little bit. It's just we need to see that earlier, so we're not digging ourselves a hole every game. But starting lineup, um, like, do you consider benching Julius and starting Nas just to try to not be down 15-1 early in the game?
Yeah.
Have more shooting, have more spacing, because Nas being out there versus Julius, you have to respect Nas when he's out on the perimeter. Um, and that Rudy's still going to be where Rudy is, but that creates a little bit of a lane for Io or Ant. That's just not there when they don't really need to guard Julius Randle right now. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if Chris Finch will do that. He uh for better or worse, he seems to be a player's coach. And I don't say that in a negative way. I just mean he seems like a guy that tries to manage egos, and there's pros and cons to that. But I think he knows how mercurial of a player Julius Randle is, and how moody he can be. And I think I don't know if he's worried about harming his ego, or that if he benches him, he's going to completely check out. But it's just like, you don't worry about that with Mike Conley. When he got benched at the beginning of the year, he's a pro. He's going to come in and be ready. I think you do worry about that with Randall. But the counter is, this is do or die time. Like it does. Sorry that you got benched, but we're trying to win the game. And you look me in the eye and tell me you think you've contributed to us winning games in this series, Julius.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see if that changes, or at minimum, if it's more of a ceremonial, like, all right, you're starting and we're going to play 3.5 minutes. And then, oh, Nas is coming in right away really for either Rudy or Randall, depending on who he comes in for. I think each of those has its own pros and cons, and you're going to give up some defensively, but um, putting Nas in for either of those guys, I think, makes our offense better to start the game. And then maybe you're not immediately digging out of a hole like we have been.
Yeah. Well, Alex, did I just hear you criticize Chris Finch after calling him one of the best coaches of our lifetime in Minnesota professional sports in episode 1?
I'll just say I think that says more about the quality of Minnesota sports in our lifetime than it does about Chris Finch. And I'll leave it at
Yeah,
that.
that's true. That's true.
No, but
So,
he's not. I do think he is a good coach, but he's not without his flaws. One of them is this Randall thing. Um, Another one is he he has a seeming refusal to want to play and develop young players.
yeah.
There's a guy I follow on Twitter called T Wolves blog, and he talks a lot about how we haven't really seen a young player develop into something since Gerson Rosas left. And Ant and Jaden and Nas were all Rosas draft picks or signings. Um, he brings up the point quite often that the only reason TJ Shannon played at all to start in the Denver series was because Kyle Anderson was sick. And in addition to the Ant and Dante injuries, like, you got to have somebody out there if Kyle can't play. And obviously TJ took the opportunity and ran with it. And so that's a credit to the staff of helping guys stay ready. But don't forget also, TJ Shannon's actually older than Ant. Uh,
Mhm.
it feels like he's this young kid, but it's like, we got to play him. Like,
Yeah.
he needs experience. And then you look at it's him and Jalen Clark that that are currently on the team that you wonder about. But I think the big question is Baron J going forward. They need to hit on him. He needs to be a dude. I mean, because even if he is a really good player, they have deficiencies compared to the teams they're competing with in the West. But and he's very young too. I think he's 19. Um, but you see some of these other teams that play rookies, and have rookies or second year players that come, like Denver has done that with some of their young guys, and it can be rough in the regular season with these rookies. But if you don't do that, how are you ever going to know? And I think, you know, we'll get into off-season stuff maybe a little bit in this episode, but definitely in future episodes. But part of the calculus on any moves is, in my mind, uh, Baron J at minimum needs to be a 15 to 20-minute rotation player, if not your starting center starting next year. Um, and so Finch, uh, that's just something I wonder about. He's been under pressure to win now his entire tenure. So I don't I understand why he would sacrifice development for eking out wins. But they've also been a middling regular season team at times too. And we talked about this in the last episode. Is it concerning that you allow your team to uh, coast through the regular season and flip a playoff switch? Like, are you capable of managing that, or are you letting the players have um, too much say in that? And what happens when they stop listening? And I don't, I don't think we're near that point yet, but those would be some of the Finch criticisms that I think would be fair.
Yeah. And I'm just not seeing many solutions here moving forward in this series with the Spurs. I mean, like you said, they're not getting a lot of good looks. Of course, they don't have Dante out there on the perimeter to knock down threes, and these Spurs defenders, they can just kind of overcompensate and they close out so quickly on the Wolves. And of course, they have the safety net behind them of Wemby, which gets into when you got Rudy out there lurking around the hoop. It doesn't give Wemby any reason to not just rim protect
Right.
with Rudy right there, and he almost doesn't even have to guard a guy because we know Rudy is just not a good offensive option.
No.
And so you're almost doubling down on the advantage they already have with Wemby
Yeah.
and just being a freak rim protector when he has a guy that he doesn't really have to worry about and who's just going to be lurking around the paint with him.
Yeah. And I don't. There's no magic strategy that they're sitting on that they could throw out. There's no obvious solutions. Um, I think it comes down to guys got to make shots. I mean, that sounds dumb, but Jaden has not shot well from three all playoffs after all season shooting. I don't know if he was at 40%, but he was high 30s. Um, Julius isn't shooting well. I mean, some of those guys need to hit some threes. They need a game where maybe Io makes three threes and Nas makes three threes and Jaden hits a couple and Ant makes 7 threes. They need shooting, and I think we touched on it earlier, but I think they need to commit to being quick. I think they need to say when that double comes, the pass needs to come out immediately. You can't let it get down to 11, 12 seconds and then you end up almost guaranteed with a bad shot at the end of that or a turnover. Um, we've beat them twice. Now, one of those was the Wemby getting kicked out game, but they're not unbeatable. We've beat them twice in this series, but they have looked like the better team for the vast majority of the minutes that have been played. But I think it's a commitment to being quick, making quick decisions, and then getting a little bit better luck on the shots.
What did you think about the TV broadcast, the home vibe with Wemby? And of course, he came out just hot as a pistol in the first quarter in that game. And it was like a Wemby redemption game. Like he was coming back from like injury, or like he was wronged.
Yeah. No, well, I've
That
seen
that there wasn't the reason he wasn't kicked out of that game is because he had a completely dirty play
right.
and knocking Nas Reed in the jaw. Like, what was your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit baffling. I saw Nick Wright commented at length on this. Dan Lembitard. It's sort of been the topic du jour of the last couple days, and it is baffling that you can almost see the media levers turning on driving a narrative for this guy because he needs to be he's going to be the future. He's so young, he's so good already. Is he going to be the face of the league? uh but to treat it, yeah, like he was coming back from injury, or he was coming back from, like, Nas elbowed him in the head and we weren't sure if he was going to play again or whatever, and they're treating him like uh like, and Nas is a villain for some reason according to their fans, and he's the one who got elbowed in the neck. And Wemby's this, like, the Odyssey's coming out this summer. He's like Odysseus returning from his returning from war, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's baffling. I won't say I don't understand it because it's a little peek behind the curtain on uh what the league and their broadcast partners, what narrative they want to drive and what they want to sell. But it becomes all the more egregious when you compare it to the type of coverage that Ant gets. Um, you know, he like his Mother's Day performance was next level given, where his health is at, and and given the human interest side of things where he lost his mom and his grandma young, and what it means on Mother's Day. And to the credit of the Minnesota media, it was one of our beat writers, Chris Hine, that teed him up to talk about that in the press conference after the game. Um, but you would think that him being a potential one of the faces of the league, that's an angle that the ESPNs of the world and the league as a whole would want to talk about, and like Ant's performance in the face of adversity in terms of injury, but also on what has to be a super emotional day for him, and all the attention's on Wemby, and coming back from making a dirty play. um it's asinine. Like I just it my little brother said to me, I think I actually would root for Oklahoma City against these guys now, which if you know me or him is a crazy thing to say because I absolutely hate Oklahoma City. But I was like, I don't this Spurs team which is from afar a team I really respected and liked all season, has generated a lot of animosity for me in a relatively short amount of time, and things like that from the media um, don't help.
But, you and I privately had this conversation where it's like anytime you're in a 7-game dogfight with another team, it's hard not to come out of there just whether you win or lose, just hating that other team
Yeah,
just
I
because
think
it's
I
so
said.
competitive. You got 7 games. I mean, maybe not all the time, but it's always a fun series.
Well, I think it's a little bit unique to basketball too, because I think I said, do you think it's possible to not come out of a 6 or 7 game playoff series absolutely despising the other team? And I don't know that it is, but part of it
I
is
don't think so.
compared to most other sports, you've got 5 guys on the court at a time. In the playoffs, only 7 to 9 guys total on each team typically are gonna play. They're not wearing helmets. It's in high definition. So, all the little annoying things or things that get under your skin are just right there all the time, and you're playing them every other day, or, every 3 days over a period of a week and a half or 2 weeks. It just engenders, even when you're not looking out to be a hater, but it brings the hater out, that's for sure.
No, that's a good point. As in football, you're not seeing the trash talk in real time. You're not seeing the raw emotions since they have the helmets on. Where we get that in
Yeah.
basketball, and that's one of the nice things about the
Well,
NBA is it's so emotional because of that.
is there anything worse than watching an opposing team's role players just absolutely talk trash and lose it? Like, do you remember when, uh, was it Gary Payton Jr. had that play, like, early in a Nuggets game that they ended up losing, where I don't know if he took a charge or something, and he was laying on the ground, like, freaking out? And you
Yeah.
got Christian Brown out there doing stuff, or, like, the Spurs series,
Christian
it's like
Christian Brown, yeah.
he's
He's
on
the
the
worst.
Mount Rushmore of this sort of thing. And like I'll be the first to admit, a lot of these guys are guys that if they were on our team, I'd be like, hell yeah, hell yeah,
Yeah,
Christian Brown.
correct,
You
correct.
know,
It's the stuff we root for the most that
yeah.
annoy us also the most when we're on the opposing side. But so getting into game 6 tomorrow night, Alex, I think the Wolves have historically played well with with their backs up against the wall, and of course they're facing elimination tomorrow night. What are you expecting to see? I know we talked. The solutions are a little bit bleak, but you got the home crowd behind you. You're facing elimination. Do you have any hope that they can pull it out?
I do. I think, yeah, we talked about, you know, there's not a lot of magic solutions hanging around, but the types of things that they would need to do in order to win. Um, Role players play better at home. I think they're this whole playoffs when their back's been against the wall, and dating back to, like that Nugget series in 24, they've responded. Um, I think at minimum, this is a game that's within a couple possessions with a couple minutes left, and it's going to come down to execution at the end. I think ultimately this team loses in Game 7, likely, but I give them a shot tomorrow. And I mean, we saw it was a different team, but we saw them win a Game 7 on the road in a similar scenario 2 years ago. But so I would expect, knowing what we know, seeing what we've seen, I would expect to see their best effort. I would expect to see them clean up some of the things we've talked about and execute better. Um, Whether that leads to a win or not, we'll have to see. But I think we'll see a game more like maybe Game 1, or even Game 3, where we let go of the rope a little bit at the end of that one, but where it's going to be close all the way through and come down to the end.
Yeah. No, I agree. I give them a solid shot in Game 6. I think it's going to be very close. We'll see about the end of the game, end of game execution. But if they're able to pull it out, I think Game 7 is going to be very tough for them. So I don't see them getting past the Spurs, even if they win tomorrow night. I think it's gonna
Should
be a
we get
close one.
tickets if
But
they force Game 7? You
I
want to go
think
to
that would be
Texas?
a I think that would be a bad idea given our history.
Good point. That's a
But
callback to episode 1. Everybody, you can go watch the beginning of episode 1 if you wanna catch that.
yeah. Well, we appreciate everyone who listened and tuned in for episode 2. We'll be back on in a couple weeks. Maybe talk about some Wolves, wrap up the Vikings off season, and maybe getting into a little schedule picking on there. So thanks for tuning in.
Take care. Wolves in 7.